Welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Willis today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
I'm here, Kevin. How are you?
Oh, living the dream, Tim. Except for the Bills loss. That's
Our
still
Bills
painful.
did it
Yeah,
again.
but which we are going to talk about briefly during the show. Probably first, a good chunk of the first segment. Not about the sports side, but whether or not government made the Bills lose.
I'm going to tell you that the government perennially makes New York teams. New York government makes New York teams lose, but that's not going to be a big surprise to people.
Yeah.
My take on it.
Blame government for everything.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that. We also have some political news. We'll talk about like the primaries going on. We'll talk about Russia saying the sale of Alaska was illegal, so it's still Russian territory. Which bold move.
Bold move.
That.
Bold is true.
So and then we got a few other things too that we can chat about. And of course, if you have a topic that you want us to bring up, drop your comments and maybe we'll chat about it. Yeah. So
especially if it's funny. Try to make
exactly
laugh. Ruin the show. Get dead air. It's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's great. Great content whenever that happens, Tim. Which I either have to edit out or just leave in awkwardly. Produce low quality radio.
Yeah.
But the Bills did not get another Hochul snow day.
They'd have been better off if they did.
I know. Well, it might have been better. But we're gonna go back. We're gonna go in 10 seconds. We'll just get this show kicked off. But go in 5, 4, 3.
Now, an hour of clarity for exhausted people of our nation mired in toxic partisanship. Left versus right, us versus them. While we pay to keep our politicians fighting, how do we, the people, rise up and solve the great challenges of our time? We do it by embracing freedom and liberty. There may be no such thing as a free lunch, but this hour is as close as it gets. Welcome to A Free Solution.
Welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Willis today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
And the Freedom Variant is here, Kevin. Are we going to talk about the Buffalo Bills?
We're going to talk about the Buffalo Bills just a little bit. Again, not a sports show. And I swear to you guys, this is going to be about policy. In fact, for those of you listening to this on WYSL, thank you, first of all. But second of all, on our live stream, the title of this episode is "Did the government make the Buffalo Bills lose?" So we got two topics to discuss around whether or not the government made the Buffalo Bills lose for a third painful time, 27-24 to the Kansas City Chiefs. And we're libertarians, so we blame government for things. That's just how it's going to go.
Yeah.
So when we look at this game, we could think like, how did the Bills possibly lose this? Was it because the defense couldn't stop Patrick Mahomes at all, ever, on any drive? Was it because of the fake punt? Was it because of the Stephon Diggs drop? Was it because Josh Allen didn't throw underneath and tried to go for the touchdown on that last set of downs? Was it because of the Tyler Bass missed field goal? No, it wasn't any of those things. It was all those things, but also it's because Bills Mafia needed to feed the pit, and the government, they got in the way. So if you don't know what this is, listen, what happened since the Bills got on their win streak, the Bills had started building the new stadium, right? The one that's going to cost us, like $800 million of U.S. taxpayer or of New York taxpayer money.
Yeah.
Thank you, Governor Hochul. So right now, though, it's just a big pit. And since the Bills started their winning streak, someone has fallen into the pit every home game. Every game, someone has fallen into a pit. So a handful of Bills fans, Bills Mafia folks, have decided, well, that must be what's doing it. The same way you might wear your same shirt again, wear your hat a certain way. Bills Mafia, the pit must be fed. The pit demands sacrifices. And so people started going to the pit. And knowing darn well that the pit needed to be fed, the Erie County Sheriff's Department's like, you got to stop going into the pit. We're going to arrest people if you try to go to the pit. They added extra security. Bills and Erie County Sheriff's Department added extra security to try to prevent people from going into the pit. Losing mentality.
They fear freedom, Kevin. That's the reality,
right.
man. Any
Listen.
chance they get to hand out tickets, they're there. Like, you know, look, the Bills
Mafia
lost.
was just doing what it takes to win games, and sometimes that means sacrificing.
Yeah, the table flops have certainly helped in the past. I don't,
that's right.
What about freedom, Kevin? What about freedom? Don't people have the right to jump into a pit to help their team win?
Right.
believe-
That's that was my thought. Like, why? So once again, government ruining the Buffalo Bills season. Like, I can't think of any other reasons. Like, all the other stuff I said, don't even worry about that. Listen, the answer was that the pit didn't get adequately fed. Now, I know some folks tried to get in there in the game, but I don't know. I don't know if they got through. And, I mean, did you see that Tyler Bass kick? Like, did you see how it just like shanked? There's something going on there. It's because the pit didn't get fed. That must be the reason.
To me,
It's not Tyler Bass's fault. It just
No.
we didn't feed the pit, or didn't feed it enough, at least. That's And really, again, any opportunity to blame government here, like sorry, the government caused Buffalo Bills to lose the divisional round. That's just what it is.
I mean that, and there's an economic.
Tim, you have your perennial, somewhat more serious critique of sports.
Yeah, I mean, look,
New York
regardless, I've explained it, tried to explain it directly how the athlete tax in New York State is the highest athlete tax in the country, or perhaps California matches New York. But that causes the Buffalo Bills and all of New York's teams to be perennial losers. Okay? Like, no matter what, the Bills are on an upswing spiritually, emotionally. They have some young talent, but they have to cheap out on things because they've got to pay the athlete tax. Maybe it's facilities.
Not
maybe
anymore. They're losing all their veteran talent, so it's
yeah, of course. Well,
they're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, they're going to lose talent. They're going to miss out on good opportunities too, just because people don't want to play in New York because taxes are too high.
Yeah,
so
I mean, you got to bring folks in, and it's like you got to then pay them enough so that they want to come in, as compared to a lower income tax state, like Florida or basically anywhere else.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's that part's simple math, right? Like Josh Allen, let's say he gets $20 million this year. He in New York, like let's say Texas could hire him for $18 million. That leaves whatever team in Texas hires him an extra $2 million for, like, let's just say backup secondary, for example, or a better kicker, or new shoes for their kicker, or better facilities. Like, the tax has an impact. And look, it's not as funny, but it's also like,
no, I mean, well, it's a thing, right? Like, because like players, like they talk about this, like folks like, I think Gabe Davis had mentioned this, Jordan Boyer mentioned this, like, and I forget, was one of the defensive players, like they talk about, they're like, well, we like the culture, we think we have another shot at this, but contract's up. I got to make sure that I'm doing the best by myself. I got to make money, and in order to do that in New York and to come out net, better, it's you're gonna have to get paid a bit more, right? So that makes it tougher to attract people who have the talent to get multiple options elsewhere at similar price ranges. So that
right, and so where it plays out, guys, is, again, I say they got to cheap out on stuff, but they don't have great depth. They don't have as good a second, like,
well, all the secondary got like second string. Well, defense had a lot of second string folks. They had a ton of depth on defense. It's just that they all got injured too. So you're on, third, fourth string guys going into the playoffs against Patrick Mahomes is rough. But yeah, I think your point's still well taken.
Yeah,
though,
I think I stand on my point, though. I still think that they get to a point of where there's a lack of depth, where the salary cap comes into play, and the big chunk of the salary cap that goes to New York State affects the fact that we can't put together depth of talent that we would like to have, and so it's real.
That's part of right. It's you want to sign like someone that's great, that's a free agent, a little bit tougher. So it's gonna have to be like, well, hopefully Bean drafts well this year.
And look, a shout out to the Bills for being the only New York team that actually plays in New York. Like,
yeah, Shelly on YouTube calls that the Bills are the only New York team that plays in New York, right?
She's right, and I appreciate them. And look, I've been a long time Bills fan. I just know that the disappointment is just around the corner, just one kick away.
Another wide right
with Scotty Norwood, Kevin. Like that was it was like his kick went wide right, but it was like a kick in my stomach. It was.
Yeah.
We were making a big deal out of the fact that the Bills were the only New York team, and then the New Jersey Giants come in and win the game. It was reprehensible.
Yeah, awful. And it's and now, millennials and Gen Z get to share in a portion of that trauma. Generational trauma. It's a Bills tradition.
I love
it. It is a Bills tradition of anyone who's paid attention in the Josh Allen era of like absolute heart-wrenching losses after like extremely well played games. Otherwise, the Bills are great at that stuff. Even the Eagles game this year is a great game. Like the Bills were amazing and then just lost.
Just gone.
13 seconds game, in great moments in this game too. Just didn't win. And then the wide right thing was just the kick in the stomach, the cherry on top to all this.
Absolutely. And look, again, I love the concept of we bond over generational trauma. So Kevin, now kind of what we went through when Jim Kelly led us to 4 Super Bowls back to back. And
so Josh Allen hadn't been even to a Super Bowl yet, though. So
yeah, and they lost all 4. They were the greatest football team of all time, sort of. Like those are the equivocations you make with yourself. Like literally.
Well, it's. I mean, sometimes it happens, right? Like, I mean, like the Giants did that to the 18-0 Patriots, right? Like. Actual perfect team, the only team to get that good of a record since the Miami Dolphins perfect team. Giants spoil it. Giants. Gosh darn it.
It's the Giants. Maybe it's the Giants. I don't know.
Yeah. But anyway, so I like our intent for this show isn't to talk about the Buffalo Bills the whole time and to have you, the online audience on Tuesday or the WYSL audience on Thursday, be reminded of a Bills loss. Or if you don't care about this stuff, like wondering when we're going to get to the end of this conversation, we will talk about politics and policy. And so we'll talk about a few other things. Now, Tim, where do we want to go next? So we want to talk about the political news, the Ron DeSantis stuff, the primary seems to be wrapping up now in New Hampshire.
Let's go with that. Let's jump on the New Hampshire issue. Look, what we're seeing is that Donald Trump results are coming in pretty good. And look, guys, I've got this awful feeling that the establishment wants Nikki Haley, and she's in a pretty close second. Like at least right as of right now. And guys, we do the show on Tuesday night, so maybe by Thursday we'll have a clearer picture. But looks like Donald Trump got about 57% of the vote. And
I mean, I'm looking at like the incomings. Right, they're still coming in. They already declared Donald Trump the winner. They're like, oh, he's got it. Right now it's 53 to 45.9.
That's a pretty good showing for Nikki Haley. Like I don't think people were expecting her to be within 5 points, within 10 points of Donald Trump. I think they were expecting a blowout.
Yeah, I mean, but New Hampshire is also a small state, and they allow independents to vote. So,
would independents in New Hampshire vote for Nikki Haley? Would they?
Yeah. I mean, the people who aren't like diehard Republicans are like, she's the option that isn't Trump. Chris Christie isn't running. Ron DeSantis isn't running. Vivek is running. So okay, so all the people who seem to have had like some sort of legitimate momentum for like even a second, they're all gone except for Nikki. So she's the I'll hold my nose. And I mean, some people I'm sure are excited about her, but probably most folks are like, well, I just don't want Trump because he says stuff like how he should have total presidential immunity, and any mistake, but even if well intended, would be met with almost certain indictment by the opposing party at term end. So therefore, he should get total immunity from everything. President of the United States must have full immunity, without which it would be impossible for her to properly function. So he wants like super qualified immunity for presidents, which that seems bad.
He says some awkward things that lend credence to the left's freaking out about how he's going to end democracy. And it's like,
I don't know, man. Isn't it sort of worth like being concerned when someone who may very well be the next president says, I shouldn't be prosecuted for any crimes ever, no matter what?
It sounds awful, Kevin, but this
sounds awful.
This is Donald J. Trump, son. Are you kidding me? Like, this guy is going to get back in the Oval Office and save us from all the mistakes when he was in the Oval Office
the first time. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. That's the promise he's making, as far as I can tell.
Thank goodness Donald Trump is going to save this country from the last two presidents who screwed up this country.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there you have
learned a lot of lessons as president about the ways in which he screwed up the country. And now, honestly, I don't really see him pitching ways to fix that. He mostly is doubling down on a lot of it. But
yeah. Well, yeah, that's for sure.
No, I mean, but for real, like, doesn't it seem bad if like I don't want Joe Biden to be immune from all crimes because like, oh, it might be politically messy. Like, so what? Like, we should prosecute presidents when they do awful criminal stuff. Like, I think the problem with our country is we haven't done that enough. There's been way too much criminal stuff going on in the Oval Office, and we should probably prosecute more of it.
I'm with you, Kevin. Like 100%. You know what I mean? And look, I think that, dude, this is probably a good time to point out that a lot of things that the Biden family and the influence peddling that went on is not like, guys, there's nothing there to prosecute them on. I hate to tell you this. This is really bad news. It is absolutely stinks to high heaven. It's absolutely corrupt as far as I'm concerned. The level of influence peddling that goes on in our country, the obviousness of the influencing peddling that goes on in our country. But no one is talking about making those actions illegal. They're talking about a gotcha moment where Hunter didn't file the right piece of paperwork, or Joe made a phone call to Hunter at dinner time. Like, yeah, it's corrupt, man. But the whole action of selling influence and peddling influence, completely legal as long.
Yeah, the Republicans don't want to get rid of that either. Yeah. Why would they? And like, yeah, like we're not, again, it's just like we're gonna get our political opponents on this, not like, hey, you know what? This is pretty gross. Like, let's actually like fix this. And even if we don't get Hunter Biden and Joe Biden on this stuff now, the next time something like this happens, there should be, clear barriers and clear rules about like using connections to power in a nefarious way. Okay. Yeah. Like that's, I'd at least get that. That would stand on principle. That would be consistent. And then you'd have to apply those same principles to Donald Trump and his family too, which people don't want to do. The Republicans don't want to do.
No, they don't want to do it. They're all invested in it, Kevin. It's a system of like, well, it's a for-profit system, and it's a thank you for the money gift kind of giving system. Please, vote my favorite regulation into being so that I can quash my competition. Like that's one of the very real functions of the government.
Yeah. No, it is. And again, and I'm picking on Trump here, but like it's not exclusive to him. Like if Nikki Haley became president, there would be stuff like that that happens. I think like Trump and Biden, like in their families, have been particularly sloppy about it. But there's stuff that exists all the time where those sort of connections are used to gain more power and gain more money, in ways that are legal but like gross, and it's just a major part of politics. I mean, especially in New York State, but like a major part of politics, and neither party is really committed to rooting out that sort of corruption and doing the right thing and standing on principle. They just want to, point at the other guy.
Yeah, I mean, even the beautiful new Bills stadium that we're all going to chip in a little bit of money for, there's a certain amount of pay for play going on. There's a certain amount of, hey, my friends and family are benefiting from this, and not a certain amount. There's an amount. That's what's going on. Like, that's a reality. I don't know. It drives me crazy. I think it probably drives all of the audience in the WS. I'll land a little bit crazy. It definitely drives our friends in the chat crazy. So here we go.
Yeah. We got a couple minutes left. I'm gonna read this comment from Shelly, who says, "I liked a couple things about Trump. No new wars, calling out the press routinely, and critically the fact that he keeps talking to the public." Let's take these. I'll take these in reverse order. The talking to the public, yeah, he does. I mean, he says bonkers stuff, but like he does talk to the public. Joe Biden's been like a lot more reserved.
Yeah.
Lately, he doesn't go and do tough interviews because, like,
imagine that.
Yeah,
just imagine that he hides in his basement and on a couch. Like, just imagine that.
Yeah, like, and then Trump will do that. He'll go out and rallies. And he'll say bonkers stuff, but he's going out and talking to folks. So that's the thing. Calling out the press routine, like, maybe, again, depends on the press. And then the no new wars thing, I don't give Trump much credit for that, because he also escalated the wars that he had. Bombing in Yemen, bombing in Iraq, Afghanistan, like, He had the opportunity to wind those down. He didn't do it. You know who actually did it? To his credit, Joe Biden. He actually wound a lot of that stuff down. Like, it wasn't great. It was messy.
Yeah, well, I mean,
but he did it.
Well, we're starting to bomb Iran, so it's
not Iran. Is Iraq? No, bombing Iran's a totally different thing. Now, bombing Iranian-backed militant groups
in Iraq. Oh, I'm sorry.
In Iraq, yeah, no, that's what it is. So the both the Houthis in Yemen and other folks in Iraq, it's a thing. But it's kind of always been a thing, though.
We're limitless on our ability to bomb people in other countries with drone strikes and airstrikes. So
sure, but on that note, we are going to call this segment to a close. We're going to be back here on WYSL in just a few minutes. Thanks again for listening to A Free Solution. Talk to you soon. Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I can't give Trump any credit on the anti. I don't get that. Like, again, no offense to Shelley. Again, I think you're earnest in your viewpoint there. But there are a lot of folks, like, including libertarians, who are like, yeah, but Trump is anti-war, and that's why I got to oppose Biden. I'm like, I don't know. Like, there's some stuff right now that I think is not great, but, like, in terms of, like, number of bombs dropped, Joe Biden's dropping way less.
Right.
Well,
it was dropping way less. We'll see how this all shakes
might be
out.
ramping up.
Yeah.
It is an election year.
Yeah. And look, we gave $100 billion worth of lethal aid to Ukraine under Joe Biden. So, like, we
aren't,
right. We're not running the drones, but we're offering up some bombs to be blown up. So there's still, like, it's hard for me, and I imagine for you, you see the humor in the moral equivocation that we're offering there. Yeah. It's kind of like, we're pretty heavily involved in our biggest piece of the economy, the military-industrial complex. Like, it's a pretty big piece of everything.
It is, and I think that's fair to call out. Like, if you're taking a principled anti-war stance, are you really anti-war if you are spending as much money funding a war as you would be carrying out a war? Right. That's.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right.
It's weird when we have $34 trillion in debt, and we can just say, what we should do is bomb people and give away military hardware, or I mean, maybe we're even selling it in the hopes of getting paid back for it. But
I mean, which is some of what's going on in Ukraine. There's some, like, loaning type of business happening, but I don't know. Well, you know what? Like, we'll save some of this for the show, because I think the Alaska thing is actually gonna end up on, like, an interesting, like, war topic as well. So we'll talk about that.
All right. Hang on, just so you know, I think most likely that's fake news. Like, I don't think it's a real story.
Yeah. All right, but let's head back in 5, 4, 3, 2. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson today, joined by Tim the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
I'm here, Kevin. We're just trying to figure out what we're going to do with this segment. What do you think? We've got a lot of news out there. We covered that.
There is a bunch of news out there, and we we ended up talking about a few more like anti-war things, whether or not funding Ukraine is like the moral equivalent of going to war. And I said I didn't want to offend one of our listeners. Shelly, of course, takes no offense.
Yeah.
And of course you wouldn't, Shelly. Appreciate you being a good sport about it. Patricia on YouTube says the whole world is at war and we are involved in them all. We're involved in quite a bit. And this the US is involved in quite a few wars. Not all of them. I mean, occasionally there's weird stuff like Pakistan and Iran started shooting at each other last week. The US wasn't involved in that. The US is mostly, I think, scratching its head at that.
Yeah.
But
we no matter what, we hedge our bets. Sometimes we don't know who's going to win, so we do a little bit of funding of both sides. We see how things play out on the ground. Like we're
if you fund both sides, you always win, right? Like you're always going to come out a winner.
Yeah, look at that. And I mean, like that's not a conspiracy theory. Like that's a reality that the CIA can manipulate and fund both sides just in case.
It's not every conflict, but it's more than once.
Way more than once.
Or even sometimes like the CIA, like this happened in the ISIS wars that happened, like which people didn't talk about like all that much. Like I mean, libertarians were talking about it, but like it wasn't like a mainstream news topic. But like like the U.S. military and like the FBI were funding like Al Qaeda, and then like the CIA was funding like groups that ended up being tied to like ISIS and these other groups. Like it was a whole weird thing where we were funding both sides of that war. And that's one of those ones where I think you and I could have a debate over whether or not that's malice or incompetence or both. Or incompetence that is effectively malice. That's
so incompetent that it's malice. So there's a certain pragmatism to it too. I'd even say if I was like a high-placed military officer with neocon leanings, I'd be like, well, we want to make sure that the good guys win. So whoever wins is going to be the good guy and they're going to be our friend. You know what I mean? Like I could see that as a reasonable psyop kind of strategy if I was a power broker.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's something to do. Well, yeah. So we'll talk about, let's talk about a couple things. I mean, we kind of mentioned the topic of, bombing Iraq again. And then we can also talk about, Russia allegedly saying that they're making a claim to Alaska just because.
So I like that one. I do like
that one. Let's talk about that. Like, let's give some context on that. What's the story going around, Tim?
Okay, well, in January of 2024, Russian President Vladimir Putin declared the 1867 sale of Alaska to the United States illegal. And I mean, basically, they're coming and getting it. That's the thing. Like, that's what people are talking about. They're just going to kind of repossess their territory. But look, I'm going to go a little Neville Chamberlain on everybody. Like, I'm saying, let them have it. We make an agreement. We divide Canada between us and Russia, as long as Putin accepts the Trudeau supporters. Do you see what I mean? Like, I think.
Wait, so are they getting like Vancouver? Like, are they getting that side? Because that's basically Hollywood now.
Well, they can. They're free to move around. Like, they can have them migrate however they want. I don't really care.
You care? Just like, whatever. It's up in Canada. Like, the territory that is, by the way, not part of the United States.
But it will be after this, is what I'm saying. We should.
You're gonna split it up. You're gonna do what was it? The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact thing here. We're just gonna split up territory like Stalin and Hitler did.
That's what I'm saying. Something like that.
Making it worse.
We all get along afterwards.
Speaking of World War II metaphors, in comparisons, yeah. So we could do that now. But Russia, the story goes is just saying that the 1860s sale of Alaska from the Russian imperial government to the U.S. government was illegal. Tim, is that true?
According to Snopes, which we all know they're like CIA-backed psyops, that is completely not true. So,
are you just believing the opposite then? You're like, well, if Snopes says it's false, then
actually, this time I'm actually going to go with Snopes. To be honest,
Snopes might be right on this one.
I think that it's most likely a well-played internet scam. Like, I think it's just a well-played internet hoax.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at with that.
Yeah, that's that kind of seems like what we're looking at too. Yeah, I don't think that Russia would have much. I mean, maybe they'd have some interest in Alaska, but I don't think they have much interest. But I also think that even if Russia tried to establish a beachhead in the most remote part of Alaska, the U.S. military would probably respond pretty aggressively. They would they would not be cool with that, even in the middle of nowhere.
But yeah, I mean, why fight them when we could just
just
take over Canada,
Alaska and
look, as an alternative solution, we take over Canada. That's it. Be like, we never.
That seems far more expensive than just like making sure the Russians can't establish a beachhead in remote Alaska.
Kevin, the Canadians burned down our White House, so I mean, we kind of owe them.
Well,
you see what I mean?
Yeah,
I'm just saying. It's
there's invasion and counter invasion plans drawn up in like World War I and I think World War II, just in case the American government was kind of worried that the British might fall to the fascists. So, that's and
here we are.
Would follow. Yeah. And here we are, says.
And here we are. Took them a little longer than they thought, and there was a lot less bloodshed, but it's looking pretty fashy out there.
Yeah. No, there's a bit of that for sure, but nope. And this is one of those things too. Like I do get a bit like patriotic when someone's like, oh, like what would happen if someone ever invaded U.S. territory? I'm like, yeah, no, like blow them off the map. Like that's not like their country, but like, yeah, we need to remove them from U.S. territory. It's not cool if anyone tried to do that.
Honestly,
even up in Alaska.
That's a pretty fair point. I think that like I've said before, it's a libertarian conundrum. I do recognize the fact for the ability to perform immeasurable violence in defense of your country and in defense of a territory. So
yeah, I think defense is totally legitimate, like actual defense, right? Like
yeah,
like that's. I think that's a legitimate expense of the government and a legitimate responsibility of the people. That like the Second Amendment has roots in community-oriented self-defense, and so like that's part of it. It's the Second Amendment was originally both a documentation of a right, a limit on government power, and a call to responsibility.
Yeah,
so
that's fair.
I mean, in a way that was much more poignant and needed in a time in which the American government's like foothold on the United States was not all that well established. Like
fair enough, yeah.
So yeah, no, I think that's legitimate, and I know that kind of gets going full circle back into our European conflict. I like why I'm okay with Ukraine defending itself. It gets a bit messier. With the U.S. funding it.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely down with Ukraine's right to defend itself, but I do still see a pretty high level of corruption. I do think that
we got a high level of corruption.
Yeah,
not high level, but it's there.
Yeah, well, I do think that Ukraine would have negotiated a peace by now if it wasn't being egged on by the U.S., by the NATO alliance. I don't particularly like the neocon argument of, hey, let's pay Ukraine to fight Russia so that we don't have to fight Russia. And I just don't like that as a moral argument. It offends me. And somehow hurts my soul in a way, Kevin. And I know that that's a little bit either simplistic or emotional, but I don't. That's how I feel.
Yeah. So I get where you're coming from. Like I think like the best, like the strongest argument to make on the other side of that would be they want to defend themselves. They don't have the resources to do so, and they would argue that it is in the best interest of the world order that respects sovereignty, and that like you should not invade other countries to give Ukraine money to be able to defend itself from a country trying to perform a war of conquest. Now, the U.S. has a little bit of a tough time standing on that moral high ground post Iraq.
A little bit, yeah.
Just a smidge, and it would probably be a lot easier to make that argument without that war. But that's what the argument is, that like, hey, we don't take other territories, and any country trying to engage in that sort of imperial aggression should be stopped. And that's why, not only do we have like the thing going on with Russia and Ukraine, like if Venezuela decides they want to go take a chunk of Guyana, like the U.S. might do something about that. If China, I don't know if the U.S. would actually do anything about China and Taiwan, because the U.S. government officially doesn't like really recognize Taiwan. We only sort of do. It's a weird thing. But
I mean, I think that the posture of this current administration, there would be almost nothing that we would do. As near as I can tell. Now, the next administration and the Republicans that are campaigning are a little bit more pro-Taiwan. And actually, you know what? I don't know what Donald Trump's stance is on this whole Taiwan-China issue, but I know Vivek and Nikki and Christie and Ron DeSantis were all like, yeah, no, we're going to go in and defend Taiwan.
Oh.
And look,
well, Vivek had his weird, like, we're going to promise to defend Taiwan until we build our chip factories, and then forget about them.
Which was like disgustingly like pragmatic, just like every other. And look, I have another joke that I'm kind of working on, but like, is a trade-off like a war with China and a war with Mexico to have Vivek tear down the FBI and the CIA and eliminate a whole lot of government? And like, is that a fair trade-off? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, it is not a fair trade-off, but I'm just saying it's tempting.
Yeah, I get it. But anyway, let's see. I don't know.
I got you speechless with that one. You don't know what to say.
Yeah, I don't know where to go with that. I was trying to look at comments, but I don't think that I don't think I have anything. So anyway, I know. So what else do we have to talk about, Tim?
What's that?
Do we exhaust the Alaska topic? I think we might have exhausted.
I feel like we covered the Alaska topic. We got to we allowed it to brush on our general anti-war stance and our view of world politics. I think at some point we've got to talk about this issue going on in Arizona with none other than Kari Lake. How much time do we have for this segment, Kevin? That's what I'm wondering.
Like 2.5 minutes.
All right. So the basic premise that we all know, Kari Lake ran for governor and lost, but she was kind of alleging a fake, like there was manipulations at the ballot box. And so now she's kind of reconfiguring herself and preparing herself for a Senate run. And I think that perhaps she's dropped a bomb on the world with this. Like, but not to us libertarians, because we already know that this is how this game is played, right?
Right.
What she did is just tell the truth about it. So as we get into the subject, I think it's important to note that the GOP and the DNC are for-profit agencies that are out to make money, and that their goal at the end of the day is to put money in their pocket. And to do that, they find candidates that they think can win. And now there's chicanery that goes on behind the scenes, because when we look at Georgia, right, and we see Raphael Warnock versus Herschel Walker, and we say, you guys have literally picked the two worst candidates in the world, or Dr. Oz versus Fetterman. It's like, how did Dr. Oz all of a sudden become a Republican? How did he buy his way into that race? And it, guys, at the end of the day, it's actually really is about money. So
And sometimes it is. It's about that. Usually, I think a lot of times it is about power, but too.
yeah,
But like, it's part of it. But on that note, we are coming up on break, so we'll have to continue this conversation after. Thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. We're gonna be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon. But yeah, no, it's
so
yeah. Like,
I
go ahead.
freaked out. I got you quiet there for a minute with my
Yeah, like I just like I was like, all right, where do I go from here? And I then started reading the comments, like, oh wait, back on the show, gotta focus.
Gotta focus. I know the comments are great. And that that happens to me all the time. You're usually good at like vamping right on it.
Yeah. I was looking for one. I was reading this one too. So Shelly on YouTube says, have you noticed that it's becoming mainstream for media to mention libertarian viewpoints while ignoring the fact that we were sued off the ballots before Trump ever was? I mean, yeah, like libertarianism is kind of like, made its way into the zeitgeist a little bit, but like it's never mentioned as such. Like whenever libertarianism is mentioned by name, it's always like as a straw man, like, oh, here's the like the worst version possible, where it's an Ayn Randian cartoon of like someone who is like greedy and selfish and like not at all considerate of what's going on, other than maybe our guy Ron Swanson that we somehow didn't mention in our pop culture
I know
episode.
So, oh, that reminds me. They were asking how did they get so lucky as to get 2 free solutions in 1 week, and Kevin and I did an evergreen show, which means that we can throw it out there anytime one of us can't really make the show or we don't have an alternative plan. So
yeah, it's something that we don't mention anything that is like timely. So like most of our shows, we're talking about like stuff that's in the news this week. But since sometimes things come up, we like to have a bank of these anyway. And I'm having a baby soon. Might be good to have one of those. Just saying, things might come up.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's a pretty good question. All right, Tim, but when Marianne Williamson, which I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to, Patty, but when Marianne Williamson said exactly what Nikki Haley said, everyone laughed at her. Was it because they ran different parties? Yeah, like look, that if we dig into the background, there's absolutely like, if I say something and I'm a libertarian, Republicans and Democrats are both going to mock me. But if I say something as a Republican, they're going to quite possibly like what I have to say. And if I say something as a Democrat, again, I can find things where they would like what I said if I was affiliated with their cult, if you will.
Yeah.
I was in their cult.
All right. Well, Tim, I think we should probably go back to the show. Matthew,
Okay.
Thank you. Matthew on Facebook says, "Congrats, Kevin."
Yeah.
Yep. Having boy number 2.
Nice.
So excited for that.
I'm having beer number 3.
Yeah. Good for you, Tim.
Thank you.
Still nursing my same one. But we're gonna go back at 44, and we'll talk about I'm actually surprised, like we talked about this thing from Arizona and like the controversy there, and I thought you were gonna talk about legalizing tamales, but
we could probably talk about that.
So I think this segment, folks, we're gonna probably do like a bunch of like rapid fire topics. Get ready, throw out some topics of your own. We want to hear from you. And Shelly, congrats to you. Shelly on YouTube says, "I'm getting a second grandson in June." Congratulations, Shelly. That's awesome.
Love my stepdaughter's having a kid in April, so there is hope for the future, man. Yeah. Like it's happening. You know
what? I love hearing about people having babies. Every time I see that, it brings me joy. I saw Austin Peterson's having a kid now. It's great.
And guys, look, and I'm going to tell you, and Shelly already knows this. Kevin, Austin, all you guys, like, enjoy every second of it. I'm at the opposite end of it. My youngest child is graduating from high school this year. We're having coming up tomorrow, Kevin, our big last, and wrestling's been such a huge part of our life. So for the last 12 years, we've traveled around the state taking my kid to wrestling tournaments. Tomorrow is his last home dual meet at Cooperstown High School.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. And then it's end of the season tournament time, which is fun, and we're excited. And he's wrestling the best he's ever wrestled, so we're really looking forward to it. But this is sad, right? Like every
end of an era.
It's just wild.
No, that's be tough coming up to that big moment. But
yeah, for sure. So I'm gonna start bawling one of these days.
Yeah, right. It's gonna tears are gonna come out there in the show, folks.
Yeah, I came close at he goes to Milford, wrestles with Cooperstown. And they had a meet at Cooperstown or at Milford, and they did a senior night for him. And I came close to balling, man. It was like, but I didn't. I held it back. I'm not sure why. One of these nights, I'm just gonna cut loose.
Yeah, no, it's fine. You do your thing, Tim. It's okay. The modern man can be emotionally in touch. Tim.
Yeah, my kid's aloof though. He's gonna be like, that, Dad, that is not cool. Like,
just gonna say that's embarrassing. Like, knock it off.
Yeah, he's gonna be like, oh my God, no, just stop. We've got we've got wrestling, Dad. Relax. Like, stop. This is not cool.
No tears in wrestling.
Oh, there's tears, but
yes. But all right.
Go ahead, Kevin. Let's go back to the show.
No, yeah, we probably should go back to the show eventually. So yeah, we'll head back. Again, 30 topics out there. Love to hear from you. And we'll come up with some stuff to talk about. So go ahead back in 5, 4, 3. Welcome back to A Free Solution. Kevin Wilson here today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
I'm here, Kevin, and before the break, we were talking about this kerfuffle of obviousness. With all due respect, was a distinct effort made to keep Kari Lake from running for office again. She's being viewed as a Trump supporter and a Trump affiliate. A lot of establishment Republicans. And guys, look, I'm going to make a prediction right now. Nikki Haley's name is going to be on the ballot. The ballot against whomever the Democrat puts up. I do not think it's going to be Donald Trump. I do not think the establishment GOP wants him. And I do not think, actually, I think the DNC actually wants him more than the establishment, like Republican Party, because they can make hay. Their media conglomerate will make money off of Donald Trump. He's being portrayed as a big, huge threat to democracy. And as even Kevin said, like, on some level, they may have a point. Like, there may be a very real concern. So there's going to be I don't know. I'm saying I think Nikki Haley's going to be on the ballot. I think she's going to be the presidential candidate. You heard it here first. But anyways, getting back to the Kari Lake story.
Yeah,
I'm reading from an article or from AZ Central. And basically, there's let's see, what's the guy's name that approached her and offered her money? Lake. Jeff Lake, I believe. Anyways, Jeff Lake offered her a substantial amount of money to keep Kari Lake from running for office. Now, is this illegal, Kevin? Like, that's my question.
Seems shady for sure. I mean, it's a thing that's happened before, like, because there's a discussion around this where, who was it? Someone tried to offer Donald Trump money to not run for office. Oh my gosh, who is that guy who got arrested for all the shady crypto stuff? Oh man, I'm blanking on his name. He was a big Democratic donor. It's killing me.
Sam Bankman-Fried.
Yeah, that's the guy.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, he tried to give down. I mean, because he sees himself as an effective altruist, and he's like, well, I can use my money to do the most good. Like my goal in life is to make as much money as possible, so I can help as many people as possible. That's kind of how we saw life, and the very very much ends justify the means type of fella in terms of like how he accumulated wealth. But one of the ways he wanted to do that is like he was talking with the Trump team apparently about like, can I just give you a whole bunch of money to stay home? Now I don't know that the Trump campaign was seriously considering it, or if they would have just taken his money and like been like, okay, cool, like thanks. No, we're gonna do what we want. But yeah, that was a thing. And so like if it actually went through, it would have been interesting. And like when I was listening about that, like it's not super clear if that's illegal, but it definitely feels gross.
Yeah. So look, what I think is that a lot of Republicans are surprised by this, and I don't think that they understand the uniparty system. I don't think that they actually understand what the GOP is. When Mitch McConnell is perennially the face of the GOP, when Mitch McConnell has a campaign war chest larger than any other Republican in the world, and when Mitt Romney is number 2, and when Lindsey Graham is number 3, why? Okay, these guys are not likable. These guys are not exciting. And these guys always back the establishment of a stronger government. That's actually the why, right? Like it's always at the end of the day about what big business can buy from these guys who then go legislated into law or get taxes like collected and redistributed to them or get incentive, legislation about incentives put into law for them. And of course, the regulatory capture where they can prevent competition for their business. This is a real thing. Having like a firebrand like Carrie Lake, regardless of whether you think she's crazy or not, based on her run and her subsequent legal challenges, doesn't matter. She's a threat to the establishment. So that's where I think this is going. That's where I think it came from. I think that's where it ends. And I think that a lot of people in the Republican Party are surprised by this, but I don't think that they should be. I think it's very much a real thing and happens all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it might. Again, whether or not it's fully illegal probably depends on the state. And they're usually more subtle ways of getting people to like, hey, we don't want you to run, but what we can do is we can set you up with this board posting, right? And it's going to pay well. You're going to make good money. You're going to be there forever. You're going to have some ability to control this thing that you like. And just go stay on this board. You're going to be fine. And then in a few years, you'll get your opportunity, right? Like that's how these things usually work. It's usually not so on the nose as this.
Yeah. It was framed a couple different ways. Like there was going to be a payout and a job like that. Like those are things that were kind of offered in the conversation. I listened to the entire 5-minute clip. There was nothing completely damning about it. It was very much talking in circles, kind of not direct. Like, oh, hey, Carrie, maybe we could find you a job. The orders came from back east, and we're having this discussion to see if there's something we can help you out with that would keep you disinterested in running. You know what I mean? Basically that kind of.
And Tim, since you have been talking about this too, I'm also going to share for anyone interested, like the audio supposedly from this conversation too, just so people have the additional context. And so you're not, so we're not just like kind of talking randomly about this thing we're referencing. If you want to look it up, you want to listen to it, make your own opinions about it. And so I did want to call this comment from Patricia. It says Sam Bankman-Fried wanted to pay Donald Trump not to run for president again, and Trump was apparently willing to do it for $5 billion. And I posted a link about that. So yeah, it was a thing. Again, I don't know if it would have actually happened, but didn't work out anyway. Speaking of Arizona, there was a bill to legalize homemade tamales in Arizona. And the governor vetoed it.
Oh,
Katie Hobbs, Democrat governor of Arizona, vetoed it. So being able to sell, grandma made tamales wherever you want. It's
that is
still illegal.
well.
You got.
I mean, black market tamales taste just as good as.
That's right. I mean, it's not going to stop. It like much like drugs. Like people will buy these if they want. Like you want to go buy these in a parking lot somewhere. Like, there might be someone to sell you. Something.
Right
and again, buyer beware. You take your own risks, right? When you do this, when you buy some like sketchy food out of a trunk or something, right? If it looks bad, use your instincts. Don't get it. But if it looks fine, like, man, I remember like there's this like neighborhood wide garage sale.
Yeah.
That we that they have around here. In like the first year we moved into this house, we walked over to the garage sale. We're walking down the street, a bunch of people are selling food. I bet they don't have licenses for that. We bought tacos and beers from someone. Like, we just definitely not allowed, but like they're just like, oh yeah, sure. You're like, you can have a taco and oh neighbor, you want a beer too? Go ahead, just take a beer. Oh, don't mind if I do, sir.
Here's a little local beauty, Kevin. Student lunch debt once again. They've done this in the past, but the Great Chobani Yogurt Foundation has gone to local schools and asked them to compile a balance of unpaid lunch debt. And Chobani actually pretty active in our community. They do a lot of good things. They renovated a baseball field. Right? Yeah. So they're throwing out money and helping kids who haven't paid their lunch bills. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's a cool thing.
Yeah. There's a question out there. Thoughts about MSNBC, and it's from our friend Shelly on YouTube. Thoughts about MSNBC and CNN refusing to let the viewers hear Trump's speech, and they got on their high frail horses about it. What do you think about that, Kevin?
Oh yeah. So again, extra context of what happened is basically after Iowa, they just didn't show the Trump speech, his victory speech out in Iowa. And who knows, they might do the same thing out in New Hampshire when we're recording this on Tuesday night. I haven't looked at that yet, but yeah, like they just didn't want to show it. They showed like some Nikki Haley speech, but I don't know. Like again, what's funny about this is that like anyone who would like really care, you can go find that speech anyway. Like the mainstream media, it's like my thought on it is mostly like, well, they're kind of irrelevant anyway. Like,
sure,
you want to hear a Trump speech, you go get a Trump speech. I just expect this sort of behavior out of these companies.
Out of what?
Out of those media companies.
Yeah, I think that they're trying to build their brand once again as the anti-Trump thing. I don't think that they serve themselves by being as anti-Trump as they are. I think
it's gonna backfire, right? Like it creates like a more victim narrative for Trump,
which is amazing because he's really, really not the world's biggest victim. He is one of the most aggressive people on the face of the planet, and so I think that this kind of weak behavior doesn't serve them. Like, if they're hard-hitting news people, shouldn't they be hard-hitting news people and be able to listen to 5 minutes of a Trump speech and be like, oh my God, find something in it for them to focus on and try to drag them down into the dirt instead of like, I like the word frail there, Shelly. Like, that makes sense to me. That fits my view. Look, nobody hates mainstream media more than me, but none of us actually hate them enough. I'll be perfectly honest.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know about like not hating them enough, but like, it's a strange editorial decision to me.
Well, it's like a buggy whip manufacturer, right? Like, what's the end result, right? The end result of what they're doing now is going to be a government paid and sponsored 100% media. They're already getting like 75% of their advertising money from big pharma, I think.
Are they? Yeah, just a rough estimate. Anyway,
I don't know if that number's accurate. I just made it up, but it could be as high as that.
Up to that's the weasel words there. Up to 75%. I wasn't saying it was 75%. I'm just saying it could be that high. Somebody, that or less, right? Like that's
Yeah. If it's 67 and not 75%, what's the difference? They're still a pretty major purchaser. I would say it's a substantial amount of money, and it's certainly
Does that really make you mad? Like, it doesn't bother me. Like,
yeah.
man, pharmaceutical advertising doesn't bother me at all. Like that, it's not a thing. Like again, that's the fine. I'll be like bad guy libertarian now. Like, yeah, fine. Like, advertise your drugs. Like, it's fine. That's just capitalism in action.
No, I get that too. And in a way, I understand where you're coming from, but I think what it points to and what makes people concerned is that there is a revolving door between big pharma and the government and the media. And we feel like us conspiracy theorists, Kevin, forgive me, but we feel like this is a cabal of psychopaths stealing every last vestige of rights
Listen,
and devaluing our money and lying to us about their products. Like, look, Sackler Pharmaceutical is it like that. We've got to do a show about that. Like,
oh, I mean, they did some shady stuff.
They bought an FDA agent, man. Like, they bought him. They paid him off. He had to change his report on what opiates are just enough so that the government would accept them as pain medication, non-addictive pain medication. Like,
right.
And they bought the opinion that they wanted. And
yeah, I mean, like there's some, again, not great stuff there. I got mixed feelings about like pain management and government regulation of pain management and the weird stuff that the companies do versus like fitting an actual need in the market versus where these products can become like addicting and destructive, right?
Sure.
Like, which is like
a libertarian conundrum, if you will, you know?
Yeah, but like generally I don't get as incensed about big pharma stuff. Like, to me, it's just like, okay, I think drug advertising is kind of odd, but I don't think there should be a prohibition on it.
Yeah, no, to enhance my libertarian creds, nor do I. Yeah. But I do like that people.
I know it's time to end the show, Tim. To end the show, Tim's a big statist, and but we do have to wrap it up though. But yeah, I get your point. You're not saying ban those. You just there's concerns about reporting integrity based on funding sources, and that that should be at least transparent. And when we do see bias in reporting, should be discussed.
Yeah, and more.
Yeah, and more.
I've got more than that, but.
We are out of time on the show. Thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. Have a great night, folks. Take care. All right. Radio show's over. Sorry I had to cut you off a bit.
No, don't worry about it. That was great. It leaves people hanging. And look, I think that being perfectly reasonable and rational about it is great because that helps me walk myself back off the ledge. But when I look at the pharmaceutical advertising and I see the opinions coming out of the mainstream media news organizations, and I feel like there's a little bit of a show going on, a little bit of a psyop. Like, even at this point now, I'm like, I think that the left wants Donald Trump more than the right. And I think there's evidence out there that, like, conspiracy theory evidence, but I think
I'm going to start packing a tinfoil hat to these shows.
Do it.
I'm just going to start putting them on every time you start going down this road. I'm just going to.
I know. You'll get here.
Okay,
You'll get here.
No, I mean, like, because to me, like, in terms of like, we'll talk about Donald Trump thing quick, just as an aside. Like, I don't think that mainstream media like wants Donald Trump, but they also can't stop talking about him, and they know that that's what their viewers want to do. Like, to them, this is the equivalent of the 24/7. Like, like, do you remember like when? I mean, we think back to like disaster events where people were glued to their TV, like with like Hurricane Katrina, stuff like that. I mean, we could like just like any like big event where they were doing updates every few minutes, right? Like, they're always searching for that stuff. Donald Trump is that. He is a walking disaster, and like, they do want to keep people glued to their TVs. I don't know that is the same as they want him to win, but they are legitimately concerned and are going to act on that crisis in a way to, try to make the most of it.
Well, that's a very nuanced position and not at all entertaining.
Yeah. Oh, I know, right? But you're like, it's just they're in on it. So I don't know that they're in on it. But I think they are like, they are like the news level equivalent of like price gougers in like a disaster. Like that's what they are. They're like, hey, we got what you want here, and we're gonna keep giving it to you. And again, the libertarian means like we shouldn't necessarily get the government involved in that. I don't think it's a conspiracy, but I do think we're going to take advantage of this situation.
Yeah. Look, I read the Sackler decision going back to this big pharma issue, right? Keeping with it. I read the Sackler decision. What I see now is that the government is, in fact, like the owner of the whole entire opioid system. Like that was one of the pieces of the agreement that Sackler Pharmaceuticals sacrifices its ownership in big pharma, and they were only going to have to pay a couple $2 billion, but now that their payout is under review because what they did was so obviously corrupt, But then at the end of the day, the government is the one that ends up with the rights to the opioids. Do you see what I mean? Like it seems a little bit dystopian.
It's for our safety, Tim. I'm just saying.
Is it though? And maybe it would be, right? Like,
well, I know that. Well, that's
yeah. I'm not going to just deny that is in fact a possibility, but
or at least it might be the intent, or it might be an excuse. It's one of those things that.
Well, we got a comment out there from an unknown Facebook user, which, look, the government and big pharma are trying to kill us. Thank you. I'm going to say that they are not trying to kill us. They are trying to maximize their profit.
I actually agree with you, Tim.
Yeah,
you're right on that one.
If that in fact means killing some of us and their profit gets maximized, perhaps, that is possible.
So, like, again, my take on big pharma is companies are going to do what companies are going to do. They're going to try to maximize profit.
Absolutely.
And like, if you accept that is just what companies are going to do, great. And then the role of government should be to make sure that they don't engage in violence, coercion, fraud, right? Like, and when the government decides to profit from that instead, that's the root of corruption.
Yeah, and isn't that kind of where we're at? Not even kind of. Isn't that where we're at?
I mean, it depends on I mostly in terms of like how I see the relationship between government and big pharma is that the government, for better or worse, makes it really difficult for most drugs to be able to get to market like quickly and effectively, right?
Right.
Like, because I see that as a far more dangerous problem than the problem that you're talking about, which is like, not to say that that's not serious, but like the amount of time and the amount of money it takes to get potentially life-saving drugs to market, it particularly in a crisis situation is concerning. And again, I get the safety arguments for that. I get the like, we can't put something out there that doesn't work and may like kill people, because that has happened before. Like there's trying to remember, there's a drug that they gave pregnant people one time, like in like the 50s, that like caused like horrible birth defects, right? Like it's a thing that has happened like a bunch of times when stuff isn't like tested properly, or worse, there's fraud involved in that like experimentation. But at the same time, like, again, I look at like the COVID crisis, like I always see that as like, how did the government get in the way, both the CDC and the FDA, in terms of getting effective tests out? Yeah. And they just stepped on their own toes so much and made it difficult for people to get information about, what they were saying was a very serious disease. And they were the impediments to people being able to diagnose, test, and figure out how far it spread in the United States in early 2020.
Right. Phthalimide, is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah. Was that it?
Phthalimide, thallium. It had a couple different names.
Yeah, that was the one I was thinking of. It was thalidomide.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was the one I was talking about.
I looked it up pretty quick. And I remembered I was going to say thalazine, and then Chili said thallium, and I looked it up. So I was like, it was phthalimide, and it was a treatment for nausea that was under tested in pregnant women. Like it absolutely caused birth.
That's why like pregnant women can't take like anything. Like nothing
Right.
is approved for pregnant women. Like this thing specifically like freaked people out so much that like it's incredibly difficult for pregnant women to get a lot of medical treatments.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So we're at the crossroads. Guys, I got some bad news. There were a lot of people out there kind of thinking that RFK maybe was a great libertarian hope. And I don't no, actually that's true. Nobody really ever thought that. But still, there was a moment of discussion between the LPNY and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And basically today he tweeted out, in response to the inflation over the last 30 years, the federal government needs to mandate a $15 an hour. Yeah, it needs to mandate the federal
we should do
government.
that.
Yeah, he's like, in response to inflation, the federal government needs to mandate a $15 an hour minimum wage. And I'm like, if I was, I mean, and I know it's not popular, Kevin, but here's the thing. It's not that making an arbitrary law of setting a pricing minimum is not going to solve the problem of inflation. Even a 2% inflation means that they still steal half of your money every 25 years. Like, hello, like that's the real issue, and fix that. And like our metrics of GDP growth, even if it's close to 2% or 4%, we're matching our GDP growth is matching inflation, which means zero GDP growth. Like that's it. And devaluation of money contributes to big money getting more money, and people who save money and hold harder assets are losing money. It's very frustrating to try to get that through to people's heads.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this really all goes back to like I've talked about my theory of like certain types of libertarians and like anti-establishment folks and populist folks, and RFK is one of those folks who, just because you're against the system doesn't mean like you're actually fighting for liberty. If you're against the system because you think the wrong people are in power, and if only you got the right people in power, everything's going to be fixed, well, you're not actually tied to any principles, right? And that's who RFK Jr. is. And why, even if he's polling at like 15% in some polls too. Like, even if he ends up doing well, like I'm not going to vote for him just because he is the alternative to Trump and Biden. Like that has the most momentum. It's not going to happen. I can't do it because, again, him getting in power, he's just doing a different version of what Trump and Biden are doing. It's just a different flavor. That's it.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying there. It very much is. He's very much trading on his Kennedy name. Now, I have talked with people that are Kennedy supporters. I like them. They're kinder and less cultish than the other teams, right? But
setting the bar super low, Tim.
Right, but at the end of the day, they're still advocating for a guy who wants to be the executive in charge, and not like, I do want to say, and I've said it before, Kevin, on the show, but independents in a sense are in fact the problem, because they're just saying, give me the best bribe, and that's the guy I'm going to go with. Like, that to me is one of the things that imparted cognitive dissonance in my brain. If I'm just looking for bribes from these guys, if I don't have a principle-based center to examine political philosophy off of, everything I say is eventually going to be wrong. Every belief I hold is eventually going to be wrong. So I got to libertarianism, and I started chewing on it, and it was around 2016 when Trump was running. And by God, I was persuaded by Trump because I love chaos, Kevin. I just was like, this is absolutely hilarious. This is exactly what the country needs. And look, I didn't want Trump. I wanted Bernie versus Rand. I saw that society was never going to be mature enough to have that conversation, and so we ended up with, guys,
we could have had a
we ended up with Hillary versus Trump. Like, oh my freaking God. Like, we failed, bro. We failed.
Yeah, we could have had like a legitimately substantive idea filled discussion about like what policy directions we should go in. And I don't think Bernie would have been a good president by any means, but like it's
no, but at least he was an honest broker back then, and Rand is certainly the closest thing to it, then was the closest thing to a Tea Party Republican who actually was and still does, even though I think he's imperfect, but still argues for liberty, right? Like he's still there saying the things that he says. He still takes on wasteful government spending. He still takes on the issue with Breonna Taylor and an overzealous prosecution of no-knock raids. And like him and Massey, maybe Mike Lee, they're the only guys that are really going to take that on. Everybody else that jumps on board, like uses it as a piece of their identity politics or really doesn't understand the issue. They're just like, all right, we'll try this. And you know what's funny is I keep going back to this. Libertarianism is not anti-establishmentism, and anti-establishmentism isn't really anti-establishment. Like, let's kind of try to, you want to parse that out for a couple minutes before we end the show?
Yeah, we could do that. What do you mean by that?
Okay, so libertarianism is a core-based principle philosophy where we're saying not just screw the state, because that's a good way to express one of our core principles, but it's like, hey, we believe in freedom from the government. We believe in freedom for everyone to be the best that they can be. Anti-establishment is like you were saying with RFK. Anti-establishment is like, hey, there's a bunch of psychopaths running the establishment. What we need is a whole bunch of better psychopaths. They're not talking about breaking the system. They're not talking about
instead of like maybe we shouldn't give psychopaths power. We're gonna have our own psychopaths. We got newer, better psychopaths to be able to run your lives for you.
That's what they're doing. That's absolutely, in fact, what they're doing. So when they're saying, when an anti-establishment guy says, "Hey, let's put Trump," oops, that was an actual slip. But let's put Trump in charge of the establishment. That will fix the establishment. Even though we had 4 years by which he could have fixed the establishment and really didn't. And as a matter of fact, furthered modern monetary theory to an extent we never thought was even possible. Like he got an opportunity to break the rules of modern monetary policy, and he did. Like literally, he did. So here we are, like, how do we fix that? How do we fix the independents? How do we impart cognitive dissonance on them? We can celebrate Javier Milei, but I don't know. That doesn't fix anything. He did go to the World Economic Forum and read them the Riot Act, but I'm like, isn't that just part of the show?
It is a little bit part of the show. I mean, were you not entertained, Tim?
I was.
Yeah, right.
I absolutely was.
Gave an interesting speech. Like I like watching him. I hope everything works out. Like genuinely, like that is part of the entertainment, but genuinely, like. Hopefully in the next like 3, 4, 5 years, like Argentina starts seeing a huge turnaround and their lives are going to get materially better because of liberty, and it's already starting in some small ways in terms of like deregulating like airlines or, making it easier for people to operate businesses. And so
the rental market in Buenos Aires, right? Like,
exactly. Rent's going down for them because they've made it easier to build.
Yeah. Rents are going down. Supply is going up. It could be a pretty interesting time. It's just, I'm skeptical. I'm always skeptical. But see, I'm even skeptical of Javier Milei, Kevin. So it's not just like I'm not just skeptical of the mainstream media narrative offered by the news. I'm skeptical of everything.
That's fair. That's I think I'm over trying to assume any like hero is gonna like swoop in and save us. Even like even like people like Justin Amash, who like I really like, and he might be running for Senate in Michigan. I'm like, Like, he'd be great. Like, he's not going to single-handedly save us, and he could switch again in the way that like Rand Paul has gotten like weird on a few issues because he's Republican. That things could change. Don't put him up too much on a pedestal. But I don't know. Hope he does well. Think that'd be cool if Justin Amash did well in Michigan, or even like his successor in that seat, Peter Meyer, is also like usually pretty great. Although he's definitely more Republican than Justin Amash.
Yeah. Look, there's good guys out there. Thomas Massey is a good guy. Even though he campaigned for Ron DeSantis. And then I thought about that, and I'm like, the system forces us to make a choice, right? It's like, who am I going to choose and who am I going to endorse? And Massey's like, I want to throw my weight behind somebody, and he does have weight. And he's a legit free thinker. He's a legit like.
And again, some of the stuff with Ron DeSantis, I sort of get. Like, when you look at like how he did as governor in Florida, like there is some good stuff there. When he like stayed away from the culture war nonsense, like, you know,
honestly, Disney was imploding on its own. He didn't need to fight them on their best thing, where they that kind of crafted out a community and was saving the government on taxes and taking care of their own stuff. Like, I don't know, like Disney's stock prices like cut itself in half over the last 5 years. So it's like they were imploding.
They got their own problems. Like, let them do their thing. Stay above it. Like, be a good governor. Like, instead he wanted to play like Trump. Like, but he can't play the culture war game like he could, and that's part of the reason why he failed, why he dropped out, and he's kissing the ring now.
And isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So guys, what Kevin is talking about is that when Ron DeSantis suspended his campaign for president, he on his way out the door, he endorsed Donald Trump. I don't know how DeSantis supporters must feel about that, though. Based on what I see on Twitter, they're pretty unhappy. Like, they're pretty mad, and I don't blame them. Part of their support for DeSantis was that they wanted somebody other than Trump.
Right. They want someone who had like dedicated conservative policies, but not Trump. Well, actually, dedicated conservative policies, period. Like, that's
isn't one of the conservative policies of the Conservative Party to conserve the GOP, even though the GOP hates conservatives?
Right.
Like, isn't that a problem? Like, don't they see that their conservative ideals are not being represented, and that if they want to have conservative ideals, they need a freer society where nobody's going to be forcing theocracy, regardless of like whether it's state worship or a religion dissimilar to theirs, down their throat. Like, conservatives baffle me because they seem smart enough on some level to understand that the government is corrupt, but they're like, but we can shape the government through appropriate action and getting behind the right red team member. Like, I don't get it. I don't know how they reached that conclusion.
I mean, that's all it is. It's more about perpetuating power than any foundation and principles.
Yeah. I love jokes about how in 5 years the conservatives are going to be conserving, like the worst books in schools and the Department of Education, and like
they're going to be. I mean, they're already like conserving, like, electing Donald Trump means saving Social Security and Medicare. Wait,
it's like, hello. Oh, and that's another thing we should do on an Evergreen show, because I'm going to run hard counter libertarian on, and I want to have a vigorous debate about it, because I think that I'm right. I think that I can persuade people, but I'm going to run counter libertarian. Well, I don't think I'm running counter libertarian. I think there's a libertarian case to be made for Social Security, that it is a contract from the government between the government and people that purchase Social Security. I don't care about the court cases that were won or lost, and I don't care about the reality of taxation is theft and they got robbed. I think that there's a contract that has been made and promised, and that the government should be held accountable for it.
All right. So whenever we end up doing that, tune in. Tim is going to defend the concept of Ponzi schemes.
Yes. Exactly. Like,
it's all fun and games until it collapses.
Who committed the fraud? Did the person paying into Social Security commit fraud? No, they bought a contract. So we'll save that for another show, though.
I didn't sign no contract, Tim.
Arguably, that would be a good counterpoint. So I can see where you're going. Already, I'm ready.
I was just given a card at birth.
It was
Here
like
it is.
imprinted, tattooed on my butt, my social security number.
Well, it's a good way to make sure that you don't forget it.
Correct.
So we have a couple minutes left. We'll throw out a couple comments, questions. Shelly on YouTube says, "Why can't we go back to identifying as Americans?" We could.
I'm with you.
Nothing stopping you.
Well, I think the issue she's pointing at is that identity politics is freaking brain cancer. Like, and I know I'm repeating that. Like, it's like they constantly seek to divide us all the time, and there's no reason for that.
Right.
And like, sure, I disagree with all sorts of people on the left because I think they're in a cult, and I disagree with all sorts of people on the right because I think they're in a cult. And that they've lost this concept of principles. So, but that doesn't mean that we're not Americans. That doesn't mean that this is not a great country. And I see that the fascist drive of othering everybody constantly, and I don't like it. I don't like it. I make jokes about it, and I want it.
But it's legitimately divisive. And in some ways, like, because there's like the partisan divisions, right? Like where people will identify with their political party first, and then there's the racial divisions, and then the ascribing like intrinsic traits to races or to genders that I think are like it breaks down the fundamental like concept of kind of civic nationalism that I actually kind of do agree with, and equality, like human equality.
Right.
And so both those things I think are important, right? Like in terms of like what sort of culture like allows us to continue having liberty, what sort of culture allows us to continue having a republic. I think those are two good foundations for that. It's again, civic nationalism, like, hey, we have a system that like we all want to make better. And then equality before the law. Like there's some folks who fundamentally do want to break that down, who think that like we need to no longer treat people in an equal manner in order to correct an injustice. But what you'll end up with is the perpetuation of more injustices and power struggles.
Right.
Sweet.
Right. And you get what you incentivize. And that reminds me, we had an article, and we're going to have to do it a different time because it's a good article out of Ohio about how they want to pay kids to go to school. You get what you incentivize. On its face, the idea is wonderful. In reality, what they should do is look at the incentives that they created, which have caused school to be a problem for certain people. But again, that's a discussion for another show. And here, Kevin, one of my counterpoints to your, the government took all the money and used it elsewhere from Social Security. It's not just a Ponzi scheme. Like if they hadn't spent the money, it would be there.
It still would not. But again, we can save that for the show. We'll say we'll do our show on Social Security. Which is going to be.
Go ahead.
It's going to be an actual major topic of discussion in the next 10 years. Like it's coming up on becoming bankrupt. Like it's actually going to be like within, I think, the next 10 years now, bankrupt if there isn't like some sort of change to either make it more means based or increasing the retirement age or something else and Nikki Haley, of all people, to her credit, is the only one who's like talking honestly about like, yeah, we're gonna have to do something about it. It's not gonna work if we continue doing it the way we are now. And
Nikki Haley's gonna protect Social Security, Kevin. I'm not. She's
gonna. Well, yeah. No, again, not full credit, partial credit to Nikki Haley for being the only one honest enough saying like, well, yep, we're gonna have to raise retirement age or do something else to make this system work. She wants to protect Social Security, but it's the only one honest enough to say like, that requires changes. Donald Trump, not going to say anything about that. So, He's going to protect us. He's going to save Social Security from Biden or whatever, and Biden's going to do the same thing for Trump. Like, we're going to save from Trump. Okay, what's your plan? We're going to stop Trump.
Yeah.
What? No, like, we're running out of money. What are you going to do, Mr. President? We're going to stop Trump. Okay. All right, cool.
Yeah. No, I get
thanks,
it.
Guys. We
No,
have super serious people running our country. Thank you.
You are absolutely hitting the nail on the head. Just to give you like a synopsis, like it could force to protect Social Security in the contract that was made. It could force real decisions, right? Even devaluation of the currency limits Social Security recipients' rights to purchase. It limits their economic freedom. I don't care about means testing. You can have that argument. I don't care about that. But I do care about the fact that the government did make a contract. I do care that I'm going to run counter-libertarian because we will always get beat on people's perception of what Social Security is versus us trying to tell them that they're wrong, So I think it'll be a fun discussion.
Yeah, no, it could be a good discussion, and I think it's gonna like highlight some of our age gap a little bit because people close to my age are a bit more cynical about whether or not this contract means anything. Because
a
lot of folks my age are like, why would I take your contract seriously? You're saying that because you're pretty close to getting it.
Sure.
Whereas from our perspective, like, we're not getting this money. Like, at least some chunk of what we've paid in is going to get taken away from us. Like, that is like just a fact.
Well, certainly. And the point would be that right now, as of today, money is being taken from you for that promise. And you are owed something for that promise. Like, that promise has been made.
Yeah.
Your money.
We'll talk about that. Their countries have done stuff about this. We'll talk about what Australia did. They had this problem. They addressed it. And I'll give a shout out to Marcus Williams.
I agree.
I want all my Social Security money back. Give it now with interest, and I want Bitcoin interest on it. I don't know about the Bitcoin, but you might get like money back. That's a thing. And Marcus, you're on the same page because it won't be around when I get there. Yeah,
I think that's an argument for the government to make good on its promise. I think he's absolutely right, and that would lend. I could use that to lend itself to my argument, even though it doesn't sound like that right now. But yeah, Marcus, I agree with you that would be a better way. I also would advocate for a better way forward, where people have individual retirement accounts. Maybe some form of compelled savings, but I don't know. But it should never have been. It should have never gone to the government in the first place. But they kept.
There
lying.
we go. There, you're hinting too much at our path towards agreement, Tim. So like, we're gonna cut this conversation off.
Yeah, we gotta argue.
All right. Thanks for your comment, Marcus. And I think we'll call it a night after that, folks. So We're gonna like I said, we're gonna, if you're just getting here now, we're gonna do a couple of these evergreen shows. We're gonna do some more deep dives in the non-news related topics because having a son soon, so I want to, or a second kid soon, so I want to build up a repertoire in case I happen to be busy. We're gonna get, I don't know, hopefully like 3 or 4 of those out eventually. Yeah, we have a few ideas brewing. We'll pick a Sunday afternoon and do those.
People are going wild on my JFK tweet, though. They're just laughing. They're like, because I did say apparently RFK is not a real libertarian, and people are just like, what? Oh my God, no! It's epic. Anyways, guys, thank you very much.
All right, have a great night, folks. Take care.